Friend, welcome back to the show. Today, I have a very special guest, my friend. He comes from the front lines and all the way to fast growth. My friend William Treseder is helping veterans rewrite their careers in the startup world. He's here to chat with me all about his new book called The Startup NCO, transform your enlisted experience into high growth career. William, my friend, welcome to the show. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Sane. Thanks for having me on. Very excited.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So we met, what is it now? 3 or 4 years ago, basically? Like
Yeah.
about 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. 3 years
When you
ago, I
first started.
think.
Yeah, when you first started your book. And then things
Yeah.
happened with publishing and all that good stuff. And
Right.
kind of got put on a back burner, which, let's be honest, this is the experience of becoming an author. Things are going to
Yes.
come at you the minute you decide to write a book, I promise.
Yeah.
But William, you handled it with such resilience and a really good way to bring your knowledge and expertise forward. But for the layman's terms, for people out there who don't know what an NCO is, can we start there? Can you describe it to us?
Yeah. So an NCO is a part of the military. It's a non-commissioned officer. So
Okay.
the easiest way to think about it is that there are 3 layers in the military. Like the base of the pyramid is junior enlisted. So that's where everybody kind of starts. That's like almost 2/3 of the military. Private first class, lance corporal, specialist. Then you have all the way to the top, you have officers, and you have lieutenants and captains, and you have colonels and generals and admirals. In the middle, you have non-commissioned officers. So commissioned officer, they went to school, they did a lot of extra training. NCOs are that sort of middle band, and that's what I am. I'm a sergeant. That's probably one of the most common ranks most people know about. And those are the folks who are like the kind of translation layer, the get stuff done layer inside of the military.
Very cool. The get stuff done layer. I love it. So when did you think up your new book, and when did you have this idea like, I have this expertise and I really want to talk to these people and show them a little bit about, the startup world, the technology world. And I want to get into that deeply here in a minute, but
Sure.
when did you start having this thought start to brew in your mind?
So I've been really fortunate to start a lot of different companies, and I've also been a part of a lot of different companies too, all Silicon Valley based, right? So I'm from Northern California. Other than my time in the military, I've always been in Silicon Valley. So the startup stuff is all in my blood. After I got out of the military, the first time I've been kind of in and out of the military for different deployments and stuff like that, and then the reserves and everything. But I started to notice that my skill set was uniquely valuable anytime I was doing anything with the startup, and people around me, they didn't really know how to describe why I was valuable, but they could point to other people who were in the military and they could say like, like that guy's great the same way that a lot of the other people at the company are great. For some reason, you're different. And every time I heard about this, I ended up kind of thinking about it more deeply, and I realized they're usually pointing at another guy who's an officer. So most people who get out of the military and end up in startups, they usually are officers who then went to like business school or something like that, and then they went into technology, right? That's very common.
Yeah.
What they experienced with me was this guy somehow, like, I can give him like half of an idea and he somehow turns it into reality, turns it into results. I don't get it. Like, he doesn't need that much clarity. And that's something in a startup world where everything is very chaotic, things are crazy. It's just incredibly valuable, right? So in the chaos, how well do you function? And what I realized was, in the civilian economy, there is no equivalent to an NCO. So there's just nothing like it. And so you don't have the language to talk about it. So when you interact with somebody who's operating like an NCO, you see the value, but you don't know the words to use to describe it. So people don't know how to talk about those kinds of skill sets, the kind of mindset that an NCO brings. So what I started to think was, all right, if I can introduce this into like people's minds, like get the mind share opened up with this idea of, hey, there's this thing of an NCO, and it's not just somebody who executes orders, which is kind of the traditional way people think about the military. Hey, officers,
Right.
they issue orders, and then other people go execute the orders. that's kind of approximately correct, but it's missing this kind of key insight that there is this middle layer, and those folks are the secret sauce of the military. You just don't think
Mm,
about it that much. Every other military around the world has officers and it has enlisted, but they're
right.
really not anywhere near as combat effective as the United States military is, specifically
Sure.
because we have such an incredible NCO layer. So for a business, if you can replicate that NCO layer, you're able to have a really profound advantage, especially in an environment where changing a lot, like at an early stage company, when you're just like, we're figuring everything out as we go, we're building the plane on the way down, and just
Hmm.
that level of stress and chaos, it really rewards that NCO mindset skill set. So I want to give more people permission to go pursue roles in startups precisely because they
Mm,
are so valuable.
yeah. Okay, let's get into that a little bit. You're right that
Yeah.
startups desperately need the kind of broad skills and knowledge an NCO can offer.
Mhm.
You just don't know it yet, right? And that's kind of an interesting thing. Can you unpack
Yeah.
that for us just a little bit? How can veterans start making themselves seen in these spaces so they can offer up those values or that valuable
Yeah.
skill?
Yeah, it's a really, really, really good question. And I think there's two different pieces of it. And the third part of the book is entirely about that question, right?
Hmm.
Like, how do you actually do this? I don't know if there's a way to do it like at scale. I hope the book helps
Hmm.
introduce some of that. But at least at this point, the way that doesn't scale is just you do it for yourself and you do it in one-on-one conversations. So I think about
Mm,
this as like each individual NCO who's trying to break into startups, you do have to do the work. You have to break into startups. It's nobody's responsibility or duty to understand you and the value that you bring, right? So you have to go through this process. You have to go through this journey. You can use, networks of other people and all this kind of stuff, but you do need to do the work yourself.
mm,
And when I think about what each person needs to go through, it's a combination of things. It is understanding the value that you bring to a business as an NCO, and then understanding how to tell that story to somebody who doesn't know what an NCO is yet. So they know their
mm,
business, but they don't know how an NCO could fit into their business. They just know, I have this company, I'm trying to build it, and I have all these problems, and I have jobs that I'm trying to hire for, but you're telling me that you're this kind of different thing, and it doesn't really matter as much what job you get. You're just going to do this magical NCO thing. And
right,
that's basically it. Because NCOs don't respect like the boundary lines. Like, you give me something to do, I'm going to break down every single wall to do it. It doesn't matter which job title I have. I'm going to figure out how to get it
right,
done. And that's going to
right.
involve moving around inside of the organization and figuring it out. A lot versus other people who might come in and say, all right, well, this is my lane. These are the things I'm meant to do. And when things get crazy, I'm going to go ask somebody for help or ask for directions, or, kind of figure out, what do I need to do? And like, I'm just going to go figure it out and do it and then tell you what I did. And that's just like
Yeah,
that lands on a boss, on a CEO, as a totally different kind of valuable employee, just to know, if I give you this thing, you'll figure it out. You're not
yeah,
going to constantly come back and ask me for extra guidance or more direction when things get crazy. You're just going to get it done. And then you're going to come back
yeah.
and tell me what you did.
That is so powerful, especially for an entrepreneur that's, yeah, trying to grow a company, trying to build it as they grow. It's so nice to just be like, man, I really need this done. And
Yep.
everyone has a title, and people. I mean, I know this. Like, I've started a few little businesses. It's like once people have a title, they feel like they have a box, and they kind of don't want to go into other people's boxes, or
Yep.
there's so much happening. But then if you have, and then the the one thing that I feel like every CEO needs is like the guy that has like a tool belt that's just like, I don't care where you, let me just get this thing done,
Yeah.
right? And like it's like the right hand man or the right hand woman or whatever,
Yeah.
right? That just
Exactly.
goes in and goes, you know what? I actually need access to this, and that, and I'm gonna go in and get it done. I'll be back when it's done, right? Or I'll let you know if I have questions. It's like that's like the best kind of employee you could like, or like partner, if you will, to have on a team, because they are the get shit done team. Like it
Yes.
doesn't matter really; they don't care about the title. They just care about the project at hand and go through and knock it out. It sounds like that's kind of the philosophy here.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you need an NCO to do. I mean, and so
Yeah,
when
yeah.
when I'm talking to somebody who is running a business, particularly early stage companies where they still don't have everything figured out, they don't have a repeatable playbook yet, things are still
Mm,
very uncertain, right? You can ask them pretty clearly, like, you're kind of creating a job description. You're going to hire this person. but you know the job is going to change because the business is changing like crazy. Next month, it's
Right.
going to be a different business. And do you want to hire
Right.
somebody who's going to say, "What you hired me to do this, and now you're telling me you want me to do these things too?" Like,
Mm.
well, who do
Hmm.
you want? Do you want that person, or do you want a person who's going to say, "Great, like I'm going to evolve with the company. Like, just
Right.
give me the broad point of what you're trying to accomplish." In the military, they call that commander's intent. Like, just tell me what you're
Mm.
trying to get done and why, and then I'll
Yeah.
figure out all the rest of it. So
Yeah.
think about, so this is what I try to get NCOs to understand. If you've done this in the military, whether it's for 4 years or 20 years, doesn't matter. Even if it's just 4 years, right? Like somebody like me did 4 years active duty and then multiple reserve tours. Um, if you compare that person to a person who's gotten more traditional credentialing, like in a regular civilian, like they went to, they went to college and then they got some jobs, did
Hmm.
whatever. They have spent almost no time being handed like a kind of a big goal and then just told to figure it out. That's very rare
Yeah.
as an experience for a normal person,
For
right?
sure.
In the
Yeah.
military, that's on a regular basis. So you have
Yeah.
so many more reps. The problem
Right.
is when people are hiring, particularly at big companies, they're looking at a resume because they think that the job is like, I'm hiring for this set of things right here, right?
Right. Right.
I show up at a disadvantage because I didn't do all that box checking stuff that civilian did. Instead, I have this kind of weird stuff in my military resume. It doesn't really translate, doesn't make a ton of sense. What it actually all adds up to is I will find a way, or I'm going to like make one. I'm going to get
Mm.
this thing done no matter what. And I have a bunch of training that lets me do that. I just can't
Right.
describe it in the language of a specific job very well. So
Right.
how do I break past that, right? That's a really serious challenge for people coming out of the military. And my answer to that is don't go to a big company that's going to use a big giant like HR system that does AI for scanning resumes and kicks you out because you don't look like a normal candidate. Go find a job at a small
Right.
business that's growing really fast where you believe in the mission. And that's going to be the closest thing to like a small unit in the military. Bless you. That's going to be the
Uh,
closest thing to a small unit in the military, and you're going to thrive it, and you're going to love it, and they're going to
yeah.
hire you as a person rather than hire you as somebody who's like inside of their hiring pipeline and
Yeah.
like based on your
Fits the
resume.
resume, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So that was sort of my next question. I want to talk about that transition. What is that hard part of moving from the military leadership into that civilian startup? Because I mean, I'm convinced, right? Let's say I'm in the military, I'm an NCO, and I'm like, man, I got all these abilities and valuable skills, and you've convinced me. I like this idea of going to a startup because I can grow with it, and if that startup really takes off, I can also learn a bunch of new skills and apply them over here to this bigger thing. But
Yes.
um, how do you get there? How do you build the bridge? What do I need to start to create this adapting, if you will? Like, how do I communicate that? I'm sure obviously your book goes there very deep. That's why
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
wrote this book. But what are the 2 3 things that I can like think about top level that can help that transition?
Yeah. So like if I'm talking to somebody who's transitioning out of the military, and if there's one thing I have to tell them, it's
Hmm.
that like what putting in reps in transition
Hmm.
means having conversations with people that you don't already know. So those like cold outreach, second, third degree connection conversations, that is a rep. You have to, that's, if you want to be a world-class piano player, like that's practicing your scales. You want to be a world-class basketball player, that's practicing free throws, boxing out drills, whatever, dribbling, ball handling, whatever. That is the basic blocking and tackling of transition. It's figuring out who you're going to talk to, why they would want to talk to you, get your personal story down so they're interested in talking to you, get them to like you, and get them to want to help you. That's the cycle.
Mm.
Just keep doing that
Right.
cycle over and over again, right? In the book, I kind of point out that you can kind of do the probabilities, you can do the math, right? So that you need to have at least 100 conversations like that at a minimum. And
Amazing.
I look at it as what do I think is realistic? I'm trying to get somebody to think about it like, how could you plan this out over a number of months? So just think about it like 10 conversations a week for 10 weeks. And how do you make that happen? Like you got to start going, right?
Yeah.
You just, as you start to get the reps in, you'll start to realize, okay, this kind of job as this person's talking about it, that sounds kind of interesting. I didn't even know that was a job when I started this last month, but people keep
Right.
telling me it might be good for this. They, I remind them of a person who's maybe in sales. I remind them of a person
Mm,
product management or in design or whatever. That it doesn't really matter what the specifics are. What matters is the more reps you get, the more your pattern recognition will start to kick in, and you'll start to realize what story is a compelling story, what kinds of jobs do people kind of steer me towards, and then that starts to build this network and this kind of momentum in one specific direction. And it doesn't matter what your first job is. That's not the point. What matters is you've
mm,
built up the skill to have the conversation. So no matter what happens with the first job, you're going to be fine. When I was graduating college, I had a couple different like contractor gigs.
right.
I got really excited about one job. I took it as a W-2. It was a startup. 6 months later, that company went under. Right.
Mm, mm.
Like, oh, well, right.
Happens.
That's you.
Yeah, it
Yeah, it
happens.
happens. You dust yourself off and you go back on it. The next thing I did is I started a company, and that company became really successful. Like, that was great, right? But there's another company I started, and it was a complete failure after that, and that's okay too, right? And that's just sort of learning to go through this process. And if you're confident that you have the skills to keep going, then you'll be fine. The problem is going from a really structured onboarding process in the military where like there's a whole way to get into the military, just like in college or anything else.
Sure.
Getting into
Sure.
startup, you don't apply to like startup university or the startup core,
Right.
right? You know what I mean? It's just a big giant uncoordinated mess of stuff. So you have
Yeah.
to, right? There's no place to apply. There's just a bunch of
Yeah.
different startups. And so it's building up that one skill, that getting into the
Mm,
conversation with a person you don't know yet, and then getting them to like you, and then getting them to want to help you. And then as long as you figure out how
yeah.
to do that, then you're going to be fine.
Yeah. Okay. One real quick tactic.
Yeah.
What would that startup, maybe entrepreneur, whatever,
Yeah.
what would something that I could put on my, whether it's on my LinkedIn or my profile, because they're going to look me up. They're going to probably Google me, reach out or message them or something, right? Okay, so first of all, where do you recommend people reach out to these people? And then what's something that would be interesting to that person that would potentially hire me? What would get them to like me? I have an idea of what that is, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts are.
Sure. Yeah. So
I mean, it's kind of deep, but
no, not. I mean, like, well, part of it is really easy from my perspective. One answer very concretely is LinkedIn. And in the
100%.
book, I have like, and you've linked to it, but in the Startup NCO website portion, I have links to LinkedIn lets you as somebody in the military, you can get free LinkedIn Premium.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
a lot of people don't know that. So the link is there in the resources. You just go right there. You can sign up. You get your gold LinkedIn logo and all that. That makes you show up different, right? Even just as a basic point right there. And I go into a bunch of stuff about LinkedIn hygiene, basically, like how you do a profile, like the right kind of profile picture, and how you tagline and all that kind of stuff. So that's all there. But say LinkedIn 100%. Nothing else matters. Everything is about LinkedIn. As a place to start to build up a little bit of a platform. And rather than thinking about what kinds of stuff can I put in my LinkedIn that makes me attractive, I try to think about it more as how do I keep the person from being worried about me being like completely unqualified. And the single biggest thing you can do is just have connections. So it's just starting the process of building out the connections. And the good thing is you have a ton of people you can reach out to who have recently gotten out of the military. You have officers that you might know. You have people that, your friends from high school. There's a whole bunch of other people that you're going to know. You have to build yourself up to your connections till you're at least triple digits. You got to be over 100.
Yeah.
Regardless of what someone's profile says, if they don't have a picture and they have like 17 connections, that sends all. They're not. Yeah, no, they're not gonna. They're not gonna talk. Even if they kind of want to, going to your LinkedIn profile, they'll be like, okay, no, I'm not going to talk to this person. But if they show up and you're like, oh, you don't look like a clown in your pic.
Yeah.
It's not a picture of like a bar or something like that, right?
Right.
You have, and this sounds crazy, but like you've capitalized the first letters of your first and last name.
Yes.
Like you're not a poet, you know what I mean? Like you don't get to take creative license with how you show up on your just capitalize things, right? So do that, and then you'll show up, and then the person will talk to you. And so I think a lot of the a lot of the way that the conversation happens is around the messages, the connection requests, the messages. You can do follow-up emails because you can see people's contact info once they connect with you. There's a whole bunch of little things like that. But the meat of it is just don't turn them off with how your LinkedIn profile shows up. That's like the basic point. And then your communication with the person is how you're going to legitimize yourself, establish the kind of framing for why are we having this conversation. And that's a balancing act of having a really concrete ask for doing a 20 to 30 minute phone call to talk to the person and doing enough research so that you're clearly explaining that you know how to not waste their time. Like I would I'm transitioning out of the military and I've started to learn a lot more and get excited about, let's just say it's product design. And I would, that's what is tied to the person's LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff. And I'm really interested in your experience since, that's your field. That shows up very differently. And then the interesting thing about it is for that person, it's much more legit for that person to tell other people around the company or other people, their spouse or something. Oh yeah, I just got this note from this guy who's getting out of the Marines. No, he just reached out. He thought I looked like, I look like a really successful product designer. He reached out, he's getting out of the military. He wants to be in product design. Like people like telling that story.
Yes.
They don't, it's like that makes them look like they're a patriotic person. They're helping, thank you for your service, whatever, right? Take advantage of that, lean into it. Don't pretend like it doesn't exist, right? So.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's kind of like humble but committed. You know what I mean? It's like take it for what it is. And I love that you said, the LinkedIn hygiene. Just clean up the LinkedIn. It's gonna do you wonders. Like I built my entire business around LinkedIn. So like you can really start amazing conversations with really cool people. And look, it may not be that person, but it may be, like you said, the person that they know, or like, you know what, I actually know some other guy that could freaking use your skills or abilities. But grow connections. I mean, it's not just about who you know. It's of course about what you know, but who you know is going to make what you know worthwhile, right? Like, so the more people you connect with, and look, use the search bar. I tell this to people all the time, even authors, really just about anybody. I'm like, if you're not using the search bar to connect with new people every week, you are missing the point of LinkedIn. It is about connections. And that's so powerful. I'm glad that sort of resonates, and I like it. It's sort of simple. You don't need to do a whole lot to get people at least interested in what you're doing. But I would add that, when you look that person up or when you follow them, engage with some of their content, look them up, research them a little bit, ask them about something, be interested in them. People love that. I know I do. There's people who reached out to me to be like, hey, do you want to come on our show or come on our community and talk about marketing or whatever? But they research like, hey, I was on your website and I just love what you're doing there and I love your podcast. They just say, like, I could tell they went, like, genuinely. I could tell they went and like did a little bit of research and like asked in a very cool way, simple way, like whenever you're not busy, yada yada yada. But that's awesome, as opposed to the ones that like sell you, like, hey man, I really need a job and I just got out of the military or whatever, right? Or I really need your support. I'm launching my book tomorrow. And it's like, that's not going to happen. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen.
Not at all.
So
that's the whole point, is that you're like, when you're doing this process, you are learning how people perceive you and what is valuable about the conversation for them.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the way that a transitioning NCO wants to be perceived is as a mispriced asset. Like, you don't understand how valuable you are. You want the other person to feel like they're the one who figured out how amazing you are. It's like
that's awesome.
It's like Aladdin, like you're just like, there's this kid, he's just this kid is it turns out he's actually like I forget, was it a diamond in the rough, right? It's like,
yeah.
You want to be the person, you want to be the person who the other person discovers and brings into the company and says, yeah, this the like peak experience for somebody in this situation is you're in a company that's just starting to hit growth trajectory, right? It's probably somewhere in like 20 to 100 employees, right? There's dozens and dozens, hundreds of companies like that around the country. And one of the people who works in the company who's senior enough that they can, they have clout, says, wow, like this guy reached out to me, hustled a ton. He knew exactly what kind of stuff I had done. He was really interested. He asked a bunch of insightful questions. Like, I don't know. He's not like a normal candidate, but I'm really excited about bringing this guy in. I don't really know why, but he doesn't understand how awesome he is. He told me some really interesting stories about stuff he was doing in the military. It sounds like really aligned to some of the stuff we're doing in like partnered ops or in like, marketing or whatever, post sales or something like, it doesn't matter. The point is they'll equip themselves with the right language. All they need to do is be excited and then view it as a opportunity for them to tap into this, like, again, this mispriced asset. Like, you are the person that they really need in the company and they'd be super excited and you just don't realize it yet. And so that's a dynamic, and you got to have a lot of conversations to get to that point. But it's so much different. Think about so it's hard for people who haven't, gotten out of the military to contrast this. But if I can contrast that with what most people getting out of the military are doing, the other side of it is, think about your resume, translate your skills from your job in the military into your resume. Here's how to write a cover letter. Make sure you dress appropriately if you get an interview. Go talk to these the same boring, they have these transition assistance programs. They're run by people who don't really know what they're talking about, and they have to go through the standard curriculum. And it's just basically a bunch of BS. It's not that it's wrong. It's just that it's true, but it's not helpful. So they're basically just saying, go through this assembly line kind of process and then apply for a bunch of jobs that way. There's no hustle. There's no entrepreneurial attitude at all. There's nothing about it. The lie is that it's relatively easy. Transition is not hard. Just go through this stuff, put on a tie, go build your resume. You'll be fine. Versus hey, you're going to have to work your ass off for the next 3-4 months, have a ton of conversations, have doors slammed in your face. But at the same time, you're going to figure out and take complete ownership over your transition. And you're going to build a narrative that's really compelling so that you're never going to have to worry about finding a job ever again. This process is going to suck. And at the end of it, you are going to be bulletproof for the rest of your life in the economy. You're going to have, the labor market is going to be open to you. You'll be able to no matter what.
Well said, my friend. You're right. There are so many jam-packed skills that people don't even think is a valuable skill in the market. And it's it's so important to know what kind of value you can bring, because every company needs a get shit done type of person, in my opinion, big or small, right? All right. So in writing this book, because this book sounds like it's jam-packed full of really insightful things for people kind of migrating from military into civilian world. In writing the book, what surprised you the most about your own journey, or about the needs of NCOs that you're writing for? I mean, obviously we talked a little bit about that, but what surprised you the most about the book writing journey?
I wrote another book back in 2017, back when Scribe was Book in a Box. It was I was working directly with Zach. And I had a really interesting experience there. That book went through so many pivots and changes. I rewrote it. I probably wrote, I don't know, the book was ultimately 40,000 words. I probably wrote 120,000 words for that book.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh man, it was a nightmare.
That's brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. This book, I applied what I learned the first time about. I have a Google sheet that has about 65 ideas for books. Wow. I basically wrote the first book that came into my head the first time I wrote, almost 8 years ago. I mean, it took about a year, so maybe 9 years ago I started. I was like, I'm just going to write this book. I wrote it, very undifferentiated sort of self-help book. It was ahead of its time because it was all focused on digital distraction, how social media is terrible and all that kind of stuff. And people weren't really talking about that in 2016, 2017. Yeah. But I enjoyed writing it. It was interesting. I love writing, but I didn't really know what I was saying. I didn't have a clear sense of my audience. I did not think a lot about marketing the book. There's a whole bunch of things that I didn't really get right. So I'd say the thing that I can contrast the most between the two books was this book. I embraced the process of truly understanding who my audience was and what I wanted them to do. I had my archetype. I had my buddy Rich, who was getting out of the military, he's an enlisted guy, who's getting out of the Navy after
Perfect.
20 years. He was my
Yeah.
archetype that I was writing
Yeah.
for. I wrote to him, right? So it was kind of like a love letter to Rich, right? The
Love it.
whole thing, kind of how
Yeah.
I thought about it. And I had walked this path. I knew where I wanted to expand and contract, where I thought things kind of landed well, what things I didn't want to waste time on. So all that part of it was actually, it wasn't that it was easy by any stretch of the imagination. It was just that it basically went according to plan.
Mm.
Because I had so much scar tissue from the first time. In terms in terms of like what was different for me, what surprised me in the overall process, it had to do with how I was able to work through some of the early feedback with folks. So I specifically went to people who were going through this part of the journey,
Mhm.
who didn't know me, so they didn't have any reason to kind of sugarcoat what was going on. And I kind of I threw out early versions of the manuscript when I was at maybe at 20 to 25,000 words, and got people to read through it. And I
Mm.
was really surprising how I got a lot of feedback about, here's a part where you do not go into enough detail, but I really want to know what you think about that specific part, because that's like my biggest sticking point right there. Right. And Tucker said
Perfect.
this in the workshop, which was,
Mhm.
make sure that when you say something, you also say how to do it, like break it down to the point where you probably describe it at a 10,000 foot level. You got to get down to like the 6 foot level and actually break it down in
Yes.
detail. So that's what I did. And the third part of the book is a very, very tactical. I kept like the same voice and kind of tried to move it along as much as I could. I didn't dwell on any of these pieces, but I made it very clear how all that stuff fit together. And so what I think I'll do in the future for other books in terms of the creative process was understanding that there's, if I give it to early readers who don't know me and they don't have any
Mm.
reason to try to be nice to me, they're just going to crush my early transcript, my
Yeah.
manuscript. Like
Yeah.
there's a great time to do that. And it's just when you have enough of the outline and you started to flesh it out, but it's in a narrative form, it's not bullet points. And then I just got absolutely destroyed, like punched in the face a
Mm.
whole bunch of times during that part of the process. But because
Yeah.
I was expecting it and I was glad for it, because I wasn't going to be 120,000 words deep, I was 20,000 words deep. Then all of a
Correct.
sudden, okay, great. And the book ended up being like 38,000 words or something. But a lot of
Right.
that was in response to my early audience versus me trying
Perfect.
to continue to build out in my head, what do I think, I need to say about what, these different topics.
Beautiful. Man, that is so important. I think that I'm so glad you went there with this idea of like, just when you know your beta person, when you know the person that you're really writing this for, and like you said, I love that you said that it's like a love letter to the person that I really want to help, because there's a different type of care there, right? And even bringing down the instruction, like how to do something, all the way down to the 6 foot level, right? Like even with that's care, that you care so much about the person that you're like, I am making this so incredibly easy for you to build this thing that it to you it should feel like a no-brainer. What steps to take next, and that's really the most important thing. And if there's one thing about very important books that help us out the most, is that they break down sort of a complex thing into a very, very, very simple way to enact it, to do
Mm-hmm.
it today, right? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's what it sounds like you did there. And that challenging yourself, sort of removing your ego and saying, look, I'm going to get beat up here, but at least the book is halfway there. And if I can really connect with that person even further, what does that look like? So there's sacrifice there, which I'm sure comes a lot from your military background. But with that being said, now that you have the
Yeah.
book, which congratulations, man, you freaking did it. Like,
Thank you.
I don't care what anyone says, writing a book is no easy feat. And so
Yeah.
congratulations to you on that. And really
Thank you.
supporting your fellow NCOs in this like way of like rethink about how you see your value in the space, in the world, really beyond the
Exactly.
military, And that's a heartfelt thing. That's a love letter. Right? And when you do that, here are ways you can really deploy everything that you have now like have done. You're not useless. Actually, you're the opposite. You're very useful. And that's a very optimistic view. I think we need that now more than ever in our world, as far as how to
100%.
transition, especially because of everything happening in our world, where a lot of people are transitioning in jobs in general, but especially our military people. So,
Yeah.
where do you
Well,
see
I'll
this
tell you
going?
one. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
real quick on that point, I'll tell you.
yeah,
So just to understand how much this can mess with you.
yeah.
So when I finished high school, I weighed like 300 pounds. I was smoking weed every day. I was really struggling, really struggling. It took me almost a year to lose enough weight to even go into the Marines. So I was
Wow.
18 when I went in, but I graduated high school at 17, and then I enlisted at 18. My identity at that time, I was such a bad student, right? I had 1.8 GPA, right? At just like a public high school. Um, when I got out at 4 years later and started going to community college, I was taking remedial classes. And I sweat my first two remedial classes so hard. It was a remedial math and remedial English. I'll
Yeah.
never forget this. I got out in May of 2005, and in June, I was in like the summer session classes, right? I only took two classes. I worked 2-3 hours a day for each one, and I was convinced I was going to fail both.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I got 2 A's, right? And I went from there. The difference between the first couple months getting out, and then after I had achieved my first external milestone, like I finished these classes, I got A's.
Mhm.
Holy shit. Maybe I'm not like I knew I was successful in the military. I figured out a way to make it as an NCO. I got promoted, like, a little bit, it was great. But now I'm going back into the civilian world where 4 years ago I was a total screw up. And so
Mhm.
when you're talking to people who are enlisted, much more of their story is more like
Mm.
it's usually not as bad as mine,
Sure.
but for an officer who's getting out of the military, they usually crushed it in school. They went to college first. They got it. They
Right.
did well enough in
Right.
high school that they went to college, and then they went into the
Right.
military. It's a very different story, right? So they sort of went from strength to strength versus
Right.
somebody who was struggling in school. If I was crushing it in school, I would have gone to college. I wouldn't have gone into
Right.
the military, right? That
Sure.
for me anyway. Everybody has their own story.
Sure.
Just to say, the mindset shift is so massive
Yeah.
that you need these external milestones to kind of nudge your identity away from,
Oh,
all the
love
fear
that.
that you have around, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I'm not like the tendency, the temptation, whatever is to give up to and giving up in some it looks different for everyone, but it may being just going home and getting this job at this particular place that you kind of knew you could have gotten when you were
Mm.
18 matter. Everybody has their own version of giving up. It's not trying, whatever not trying looks like in that moment. But it's like not taking a big swing when you're getting out, not trying to
Mm.
build a meaningful life that is up and to the right from what your military service was. And if you aren't able to do that, then what happens is your next step is down. And then your military experience becomes like a peak. And then
Mm.
you're like, I don't know if you saw Napoleon Dynamite. There's just like the guy who was like the high school quarterback who's like talking about I used to be able to throw a football, blah, blah, blah. I can throw a football over those mountains. Like that's the guy that you're going to become if you don't push yourself when you get out. And it's not because you don't want to necessarily. I think the book here is trying to awaken something for some people. Hopefully, it's the startup might be the target that you kind of aim at, and the last part of the book, which goes, like you said, down into like the tactics, the techniques, everything you need to do to actually make this happen. It's trying to minimize the amount of wasted effort. First, you have to
Mm.
convince you that there's an opportunity here, like intellectually. Yes, you can actually be a great fit for this kind of an environment versus a more corporate environment. You're actually very well suited for a startup. And then if I can convince you that that's true, then I need to tell you, okay, well, now go do these things. And you can do
Right.
them from anywhere. So you have no excuse. Just start.
Right.
And you'll start to
Right.
get that external validation, the equivalent of like getting the A in the remedial class. And you know, 2 years later, I transferred into Stanford, right? And I had a 4.0.
Yeah.
But
Amazing.
2 years before that, I was sweating a remedial English class.
Right.
I was convinced that I was going to fail, right? That's how fast
Right.
your mindset can change, and you need to push yourself to get in that kind of a trajectory. And so that's where I
Mm,
think the power of the book really is in framing it for that audience, is
mm,
just like, it's a mindset thing, and you just need to find out a way to get enough traction so the world starts to send you feedback that says yes, like, yes, you're doing it, yes, exactly, keep going, keep going, keep going, right? Don't default to the path, because otherwise you're going to get steered into a more traditional like thing, and that's probably not the right fit for you. So
right.
that's the piece of it that I really come back to, is people who are kind of settling for less because they aren't willing to take a big swing, and they don't have the playbook
Mm,
that they can kind of walk through that lets them go from, I think I might be able to be meant for something more here, and I think I might be able to really actually make it in something that's it's scarier than I thought of what I was going to do afterwards, but maybe I can do it, and then I actually start to go do it, and then it actually
yeah.
turns out to work, you know.
Bro, that is so powerful. And your personal narrative, obviously, why you're so passionate about this and helping others. I mean, it screams volumes about why you're so interested in helping others in this way. You've been there, you've expanded that identity, you've grown out of that world, and then now serve our world in a different way.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's epic, man. I love, even when we first met, when you were telling me about this stuff, I was like, man, this is a good book. Not only because, obviously the story and the works and like sort of the building, the how-to things, you lived it. Like, there's nothing more extraordinary than I was like, this is someone I could believe in because you've lived it and you've done it. And so now it gives me a roadmap. I don't need to do it exactly like you did, but
No.
it gives me an idea of how I can do it. And that's, again, back to this idea, what do powerful books do? They're really, they're powered by an author that's really giving it that juice. That juice is, that is a lived experience that you can go enact now. So congratulations again, man, on launching your book.
Thank
I put it up here several times. You can go get it on Amazon. You can go visit the NCO sort of like ChatGPT, that resource place that William has created for all of you. If anything, just connect with my man William on LinkedIn. Maybe he'll check out your profile and give you some tips. I don't know.
Absolutely.
But other than that,
Absolutely, absolutely, I
yeah.
will. Yeah, well, I was gonna say,
Uh,
if people want to reach out, people coming out of the military, I actually have it on it's the last part of my tagline. I put Startup NCO at the end of my tagline. I
Beautiful.
guarantee you, anybody who creates a LinkedIn profile that doesn't look like if you don't look like a clown and
Yeah,
you have Startup NCO in your tagline, I'm 100% going to connect with you. There's no way I'm not
that's
going to connect
awesome.
with you. Yeah.
I love that. So yeah, if you're out there, definitely go get this book. Support my man. It just came out. Again, congratulations. Is there anything else you want to leave the audience with?
I think that so for the authors, right? I would
Yeah.
just say that I've been on a couple deployments. Like I've lived a pretty interesting life, I think, with a fair amount of interesting experiences, some very challenging. That, as you said earlier, writing a book is hard. It's very hard, and you need to lean on other people to get it done. It
Mm,
takes a village to write a
mm.
book. 100%,
Yeah.
100% lean on
Yeah.
other people. I
Yeah.
smiled a lot more writing this book than I did my first book. And
Nice.
every author, as they're writing, should be smiling,
Yeah.
because the story that you're trying to bring out into the world for your reader is it's personally meaningful, and there's something there. There's a reason why you're doing all this work. So find a way to surround yourself with the people that can help you like give birth to that story, and do it in a way where it just doesn't feel like it's a solo grind, but instead it feels like you're doing it with a team behind you.
So important. And if you're out there and you've been in the military, you know how important a team is. This
That's
is
right.
not a solo act. Everything we do is done better with the team. My friend
That's right.
William, so good to see you, brother.
You too.
Thanks again for coming on the show. Y'all take it easy. Peace.